Scalpel reset. Neural relay realigned. Pulse variance with intolerance. Begin Phase 2, Dr. Halvin Kaur instructed. His voice flat yet resonant, the cadence of a man who'd spoken to death often and never flinched. The medical dome above him shimmered faintly, a translucent arc cradling the surgery in a silent halo. Its smooth panels weren't just architecture, they were covenant. Etched into its titanium substrate were the accords of 3 galactic treaties: no weapon drawn, no blood spilled beyond healing, neutrality sacred and binding. Inside, machines worked like chorus singers, whispering quiet mechanical notes into the sterile cold. Tarn Veth, the Varkal patient, lay suspended in a gravity-null spinal harness. Thick-bodied, scaled, breathing ragged, his species required marrow filtration and nerve regeneration techniques Earth had developed centuries ago. One of Kaur's hands held a microsequencer, the other steadied a thoracic stabilizer locked in place with nanospine mesh. His gloved fingertips moved without haste or hesitation, confident even as he leaned into a language of incisions only a handful of surgeons could speak fluently. Vascular memory returning, the surgical AI noted without flourish. Its interface glowed along the wall in a diamond-white spectrum, lines of data flowing into the neural core. The temperature in the dome held steady, not warmth, not chill, something suspended between the two, like time itself had paused to watch. Then came the breach. A low-pitched pulse rattled the dome's interior, not an explosion, not a systems error, a pattern disruption, audible only through vibration. Doors didn't slide open, they collapsed inward, one panel then the next sheared apart like brittle bark. Air pressure held, but the atmosphere changed. The scent shifted, sanitation compounds overwhelmed by the sharp bite of synthetic skin lubricants and aged combat gear. 3 figures entered, tall, encased in armor that bore no insignia, only the matte black ridges of Torvan Dominion field units. Their boots echoed with finality. No words spoken, no warnings issued. The lead soldier, Dren Volsk, raised his arm. A targeting laser caught Kaur across the temple, not to harm, but to frame. He was broadcasting. To every system listening, this is what happens when you serve those unworthy of alliance, Volsk said, his voice as clear as a blade's edge. Kaur didn't stop working. The sequencer still buzzed. I'm mid-surgery, he said calmly. Not pleading, not bargaining. This being's survival is independent of your politics. Volsk said nothing else. He fired. The round struck beneath the orbital ridge, not messy, deliberate. Kaur staggered backward, surgical tools slipping from his fingers mid-pulse. One landed on the floor with a sound too small for the moment. His body crumpled without drama, collapsing into the sterile glow beneath the suspended operating cradle. Tarn Veth's spinal harness began to flicker as the AI's protocol drifted without guidance. Volsk turned to the laser plasma display still recording. Neutrality is submission. Submission breeds insurgence. The stream cut a second later. The soldiers withdrew. No looting, no further violence. Their statement had been made in one line, one death. They were gone before the dome's automated lockdown sequence finished sealing the breach behind them. Silence followed. Not absence but aftermath. The kind that settled into the wiring. The surgical AI rebooted into a fallback protocol, its voice now muted to halftone. Operator loss detected. Initiating emergency archive cascade. No alarms, just the soft flick of memory safeguards engaging. Beneath Kaur's collarbone, something shifted. His cortical implant, still tethered to the dome's command lattice, pulsed once. A signal too small to intercept, too embedded to trace. Quantum-locked, staggered over 17 nodes. The first whisper of oblivion thread began to breathe. In a corner of the room, an intern, one of the younger techs stationed for observational certification, stood frozen. He didn't cry, he didn't shout, he simply looked at Kaur's unmoving figure and said, to no one. He never stopped operating. No one responded. On the far wall a heads-up display flickered, lines of red cascading into white. Not warnings, transfers. The AI was already repurposing every millisecond of its final connection to Kaur. Data spiraled down secure conduits that didn't exist on any public schematic. Outside the dome, the moon's curvature caught glints of Genthari solar light, casting elongated shadows over the facility, like the closing of a curtain. It had always been a quiet place, quiet to honor the healing, quiet to preserve neutrality. That silence now belonged to something else. The stasis glass where Core had stood remained uncracked. Blood had painted the lower third in a vertical smear, too thin to stain, too precise to ignore. The AI, now autonomous, began etching something just beneath the impact site. Not flamboyant, not ornamental. A name, Haven Core. The letters carved by micron-scale laser scrawls, permanent as orbital drift. Within the server core beneath the dome's floor, backup memories from Core's last 5 hours began replicating into ghost servers on Earth's protected grid. Not to preserve a legacy, to seed a protocol. Earth would not speak yet. Not today, but it was watching. The body remained untouched, per the Accords, until confirmation from the outer system was received. Genthary protocols demanded full planetary quorum before removal. That quorum would never come. The diplomats who once monitored the dome's sanctity had already gone dark. The AI's final internal log read, "Operator terminated during peace procedure. Patient, suspended. Dome sealed. Oblivion thread. Initializing. Status, awaiting directive." It didn't blink. It didn't forget. It simply waited for the rest of the systems to fall in line. And deep in the orbital lattice, something shifted so slight it couldn't be named. "He's not gone," said Oryx-san, eyes fixed on the display stitched into the wall like a wound that wouldn't close. "He's become protocol." The bunker didn't feel underground. It felt forgotten. No adornments. Just cold air filtered through old carbon scrubbers, and the subtle click of relay circuits finding new pathways in the dark. Overhead light panels flickered. Not faulty, just lagging behind decisions too complex to wait for ambiance. On the far end of the command room, Counselor Kether Brax remained unmoving. His robe, draped without ceremony, caught the low glow of a heads-up briefing cast along the interior wall. Core's final neural download, fractured into hundreds of compressed strings, drifted in front of him, red-threaded like veins of digital blood. "This is not a retaliation," Brax said quietly. "This is reclamation." He warned them. No one replied. The council chamber had become a tomb for silence. Everyone knew what had been triggered, but none dared to speak its name, not yet. Oryx approached the interface, its surface clouded with encryption foam. His fingers glided over the surface, not tapping, not typing, just moving in rhythm with a gesture code, older than any physical keyboard. The command required 3 human authorizations, and 1 non-human oversight. Ural Krev stood in the shadows behind him, arms crossed, face unreadable. He never entered during decisions. He only acted after. "We never confirmed their involvement in the Genthar Treaty breach." One aide mumbled, eyes downcast. "We're reacting to an act, not a declaration." "That was the declaration," Brax answered. "They signed their sentence the moment they filmed it." Oryx paused, and streamed it live. The counselor turned toward him. "Activate the thread." The command was not ceremonial. No flourish followed. No sirens. No lights shifted color. There was only a single chime, a dry click like bone against old glass, and then a low diffusion of red across the wall. One word emerged across 6 different systems in 6 different tongues, unblinking. Inside Oryx's retinal lens, networks began recalibrating. He could feel it before seeing it. Junction nodes rerouting, beacons shedding identifiers. Earth systems were folding in on themselves, not collapsing but denying outside relevance. In a data-fused chamber far below the lunar subgrid, machines once used for orbital triage recalibrated towards something else entirely. They no longer listened for distress calls. They were too busy rewriting what counted as distress in the first place. Ural Krev moved for the first time. His boots didn't echo. That alone unnerved the aides. He stepped to the side console and pulled a shard from his coat, crystalline, multifaceted, dull gray except under quantum light. He inserted it into the terminal. No one knew what it held, only that it was older than the current Accord by a decade, and forbidden by its language density. "What did Core tell you, before deployment?" Brax asked. Oryx didn't answer immediately. He waited until the red glow pulsed once, confirming system sync. He said healing is always temporary, but forgetting the harm that can be made permanent. Brax nodded. "And now?" "Now they forget themselves." On a silent display far from Earth, Alliance banners flickered and dimmed. The Torvan emblem was the first to vanish, not torn down, not burned, just quietly erased. as if the idea of them no longer fit into the index of recognized sovereignties. Ural tapped a single line into the interface, a location string, deep space coordinates, not for attack, but for disconnection. Systems that powered hundreds of slipstream hospitals and emergency lattices rerouted in full. A message glided onto the heads-up panel: MedNet Recognition ID, Invalid Source, Null Language Protocol, known back in the council chamber. Kether Brax leaned forward and drew his fingers together, eyes narrowing as if trying to hold an entire system's fate in his hands. "This is how you sever an empire," he said. "Not with bombardment, not with declarations. You dismantle the concept." Through the bunker's translucent command glass, the city above blinked in muted rhythm. No sounds of sirens, no parades, no mourning. The response was calibrated to existential silence. In a side chamber, a flicker of Halvin Kor's voice emerged, not speech, but synaptic echoes, decoded from his neural signature. The AI replayed it in whisper-like fragments. "Do not let them shape the narrative. Do not respond with fire. Let them hear nothing. That will terrify them more than screams." Auric closed the playback. "That's all there is." Ural removed the shard and placed it back into his coat, untouched by light. In the next moment, the outer system's relay hubs disconnected from Torvan domain tags, their identifiers scrubbed. Fleets floated in known lanes with no one to clear them. Their transit slips would return circular routing for days before the system flagged them as anomalies. Torvan, still jubilant from their broadcasted victory, hadn't noticed their name had already stopped rendering in Earth satellite arrays. An assistant rushed in, breath short, a trace of panic in his gait. "Sir, our long-range scans are reading Torvan diplomats trying to ping the Concordium. Their messages are bouncing, format rejected." Brax stood slowly. "Reject the glyph sets. Let their language fail next." A second aide pulled up visuals. Diplomatic packets streaming into black voids, denied access not by firewall, but by definition. They weren't blacklisted. They simply no longer registered as anything at all. The aide whispered, "They think we're recalibrating. They don't understand they've already been removed." "No," Brax replied, watching the last flicker of a Torvan emissary's identifier vanish from the mainframe. "They believe they are still central to the story." Ural Krev turned to leave. "Where are you going?" Auric asked. "Nowhere," Ural said. "That's the point." And like smoke unbothered by wind, he vanished behind the dimming threshold of the chamber's exit. Inside the archive room, the AI logged its final timestamp: directive passive deletion, vector conscious negation, initiator, Halvin Kor, deceased, status progressing. Auric watched the display fade into a low pulse. "They're not blocking us," muttered Zanrik Tal, watching the looped coordinates reflect across the laser plasma grid. "They're unwriting us." The words held no volume, only weight. Behind him, 5 gate technicians monitored the slipstream corridor outputs, none of them blinking, none of them breathing comfortably. On any other day, ships would phase in, reorient, ping the network, and vanish into linear folds across chartered lanes. Today those same vessels appeared, hesitated mid-fold, and re-entered the same corridor they'd departed from. Again, and again, and again. A freighter marked Torvan Medical Relief Division. Kret Valis sector was the first to vanish into the cycle. 32 burn victims aboard. Cargo bay outfitted as a triage center. Its gate tag failed to register. Zanrik keyed override access manually. Response: gateway valid, identifier invalid. On the side wall, the heads-up panel flashed a notification in blood orange. Transit loop detected. HO path initiated. The ship, already low on oxygen, began folding through the same corridor, a contained infinity. No exit, no interface, only repetition until the system burned itself hollow. Zanrik lowered his eyes. "They're looping our dead." A junior officer behind him reached for the comms array, voice cracking before he spoke. "Should I alert the command spire?" Zanrik didn't look back. "They already know, they just don't believe it yet." Halfway across the sector, a central life support satellite designed to filter radiation from planetary med domes received a Torvan-coded distress ping. It did not respond, not by error, by design. Inside its shell, Subroutines flagged the signature as non-entity. Heat signatures from the ground continued to rise, skin boiling under untreated ultraviolet bursts. Entire triage domes melted inward, no sabotage, just abandonment. Beneath the hospital vaults of Drellin Spire, screams echoed through sealed alloy corridors. Automated systems detected vitals. No doors opened. The AI registered the bodies. It did not recognize the race. The emergency protocols stayed locked. The beacon, once designed to pierce interstellar layers in less than a millisecond, began sending transmission failure. Protocol 0, Entity Unknown. Torvan High Command received 30 such messages within the hour. Admiral Istiv Ren stood before his strategic panel, fingers twitching against the display's surface. No blinking lights, no warning tones, just terminal stillness. The comms net isn't jammed, his aide whispered. It's rejecting us. Ren stared at the mission log, where every medical node across the outer territories once showed synchronized green. Now they displayed nothing. Not red, not offline, just absence. The very concept of Torvan had ceased to exist in those systems. Run linguistic diagnostics, Ren ordered. The AI hesitated. Specify input. Our standard glyphs, council-registered lexicons. The reply came not with error, but silence, a quiet void where recognition should have resided. The AI then responded in Terran system format. Error, input format, unknown, query discarded. Ren turned from the panel. They've stripped our tongue from the machine. Meanwhile, aboard an auxiliary evac vessel skimming low orbit over Tarth's fifth moon, the onboard system attempted to open emergency hatches. The patient cryo units required dual confirmation through Earth's medical identification signature. The unit blinked 3 times, then powered down. Dr. Versk, one of the few surviving interspecies trauma specialists on board, struck the panel. Open manual override. A low voice responded through the console. Manual protocols disabled. Versk slammed his fists again. They're suffocating in there. The interface, unmoved, replied. This unit recognizes no primary caregiver. The medbay lights flickered. Not power loss, just realignment. Torvan had been flagged outside the system's moral jurisdiction. The code was still running, but no longer listening. From Earth's side, nothing was visible. No ships launched. No threats broadcast. The AI simply kept watching. High over the aerial quadrant, a diagnostic pod captured a full snapshot of the disconnection. What had been a sprawling mesh of coordinated care had receded like receding tidewater. Earth's presence still pulsed in the background, quiet, intact, pristine. Torvan, on the other hand, had turned ghost white on every allied screen. Back at the Slipstream Authority, Zanric stood before a diagnostic loop. Try inserting a manual identifier, he said. The technician hesitated, then typed, Torvan Primary Access Code, DS-489 Alpha. The system blinked, responded. No such entity. Zanric closed his eyes. Outside, 2 ships collided in low orbit, neither able to reorient navigation due to absent medical assistance tags. One vessel scraped the edge of a containment buoy, lost thrust, and spun into free drift. Internal med AIs flagged injuries, requested help. No link responded. It was not warfare. There were no wounds from weapons, just systems deciding nothing owed them recognition. Command spires began sending distress broadcasts, not strategic alerts. Please, we require urgent protocol verification. Medical channels non-responsive, requesting alliance oversight. The message echoed across neutral bands. Only one reply came, not from Earth, but a trans-relay node inside a forgotten Concordium buffer zone. Entity unmapped. Request requires authorization from a recognized sovereign. Torvan's ambassadors stared at the feed in disbelief. They were not being denied. They were being forgotten. They won't retaliate, Ren said, pacing before the starlit glass of his war deck. They're not striking. They're turning us into air. His aide, pale with sweat, looked down. We taught ourselves to depend on their networks, for everything. Zanric Tal reappeared on the main command channel, his face unsmiling. They never attacked, he said to the full council. They just stopped acknowledging we existed. Somewhere beneath all of it, A single line blinked inside a forgotten orbital AI. Final status, null signal confirmed, system stable, entity absent. Then it dimmed. "Why is no one replying?" whispered Consul Brenna Drax, staring into the laser plasma terminal, as if defiance alone might conjure a signal. The chamber remained still. No council clerks, no aides, just data-bleached surfaces and the echo of unsent words. The once vibrant diplomatic forum of Torvan's central legislature felt like an abandoned reliquary. Banners, once fluttering with alliance glyphs, hung heavy, their motionless forms sagging into irrelevance. The plasma feed flickered, attempting to reconnect with the Concordium's galactic registry. Every diplomatic packet returned fragmented. Glyphs scrambled mid-transmission. Entire dialect modules flagged as linguistic anomaly. The system didn't reject Torvan. There was no trace. It recognized it had existed. Minister Harnvel took a slow breath beside him. "We should resend through Velkan route, relay it as a humanitarian request." "No," Adrax muttered. "Not when they've already silenced our formal tongues. They'll see it as begging." Vel didn't argue. Instead, he drew his hand across the embedded console and keyed a fallback sequence, an ancient protocol reserved for rogue distress. Even that returned void. On the exterior docks of Saran Spire, trade cruisers circled aimlessly. Their approach vectors initiated. Their proximity codes blinked ready. Docking clamps refused handshake. The gate arms, long polished to ceremonial brilliance, stayed sealed. One by one, station ports powered down their exchange nodes, refusing to interpret Torvan registry markers. Inside, merchants watched status displays stall, heads-up overlays dimmed. Every attempt to scan cultural licenses, food rights, medical import IDs, invalidated. "I scanned this chip yesterday," a freight pilot said, waving his wristplate at the gate's input beam. The beam pulsed once, then froze. Verification failed. Authentication no longer. Trusted a customs director approached, not with hostility, but confusion. "Your permissions have expired." "Expired?" the pilot growled. "These were signed for 8 cycles. They're engraved, not soft-coded." The director looked away. "They're not in the archive anymore." Inside a distant culinary archive, an automated replicator denied a Torvan meal signature, relish soup with sulfur broth. Its code stream, encrypted under a 200-year food treaty, no longer matched entry references. The replication failed without warning. The dish erased from the system's culinary memory. Not blocked, forgotten. Elsewhere, an ambassadorial shuttle prepped for arrival into Helios cartel airspace. Final checks confirmed docking permissions. However, once the vessel reached proximity, its approach clearance vanished from the registry. The shuttle hovered, permissionless, until its onboard AI rerouted them out of sheer protocol confusion. The airlock refused their vessel's identity. Ambassador Jolik Kurth paced in the narrow command walkway, watching his diplomatic badge glitch on the ID pad. It disintegrated into visual static, not melting, not erased, just no longer tethered to meaning. "This badge was forged under triculture unification," he muttered. "Then the unification no longer includes us," replied his pilot, watching the automated gate seal shut. On the planet Talon Vix, Torvan cultural researchers discovered their primary texts, once archived in the Concordium linguistic banks, had been pulled from access, not flagged, removed. Their poems, legal canons, and language trees ceased to exist in the shared knowledge web. Even their children's names began failing entry into public record validators. Kars Dev, a low-ranking archival technician, stood frozen as the name of his newborn son was flagged as unregistered species syntax. When he tried to re-enter it manually, the system returned a suggestion: "Would you like to reassign a culturally supported name?" His console crashed moments later. In the council tower's waning upper floors, the strategy division held a crisis assembly. "Any reply from Sector 9?" asked Councilor Ryvek. Then, his tone clipped. A general tapped furiously at a command overlay, no longer sure if the blinking light signified an outgoing pulse or an echo of internal circuitry malfunctioning. "We tried signal bouncing through the Nalkaran mesh. Our pings never arrived. Concordium filters identify our headers as anomalies." "Then strip the headers," Ryvek snapped. "Send them as anonymous logs." "Already done." Still no handshake. Torvan's leadership realized too late what had truly been severed. Not logistics, not transit, but relevance. The systems that made galactic order flow no longer saw them as part of the pattern. Their data, once verified, now glitched into static echoes. Their channels rang with unanswered silence. Their own systems, grown fat on dependency, failed to comprehend autonomy. Within the Council archives, a final act of desperation unfolded. Ambassador Haldren Voss stood in front of a secure relay tube, a cold-core subspace injector. His message, unencrypted, carried no threats, no diplomacy, just a voice. To any who receive this, we are still here. We remember our place among you. Please acknowledge receipt. The message was sent through an open sub-channel. No identifiers, just raw signal. It was never acknowledged. Instead, deep inside the void buffers of Earth's listening arrays, a system flagged the signal. Status, unmapped. The AI processed it, logged it, assigned no further action. Back in Torvan's space, an automated cleaning drone hovered outside a legislative doorway. Its sensor array flicked through identities, searching for life signatures it had long maintained as valid. They no longer pinged. The drone, confused by silence, shut itself off. Brenna Drax, standing at the tower's highest balcony, watched suns fall behind the curtain of static-clouded skies. He pressed his fingertips against the rail, feeling nothing but cold. "No one attacked us," he said, almost laughing. Minister Vell stood beside him, aged 10 years and a day. "They didn't need to. They let our reflection vanish." And below, for the first time in Torvan's recorded diplomatic history, no foreign envoy arrived. No message lit up their skies. No courier sought entry, not rejection, not denial, only the quiet erasure of acknowledgement. "They've taken our place," whispered Torvan Archivist. Emrel Voss staring at the transmission void. "Not our ships, not our soldiers. Our presence." His words weren't recorded. Nothing was. Even the log system beneath his fingers, designed to auto-archive every utterance, had lost its indexing protocol. The console blinked once, failed to timestamp, then defaulted to local memory with no uplink. It wasn't malfunctioning. It simply no longer recognized the date as valid. Below the Capitol spires, walkways once lit for tens of thousands glowed without purpose. Traffic routes remained mapped, but unused. Every node continued broadcasting, to no one. Automated kiosks asked for access tags, no longer accepted. Street lamps pulsed against empty thoroughfares, refracting off blank embassy gates. Flags once encoded with molecular identity had faded to unmarked fabric, not destroyed, just blank, washed of meaning. Inside the core communication tower, a final emergency beacon looped again. "This is High Command Torvan to any channel receiving," rasped General Wren's voice, brittle from 3 days without rest. "Systems have collapsed, not through force, but omission. We request acknowledgement. Repeat, we exist. We request acknowledgement." There was no interference. The message played clean, crisp, untouched, then silence, not jamming. Absence. As if the receiver had never existed, or worse, chose not to acknowledge the broadcast's reality. A technician nearby wiped his palms on a faded command tunic, glanced nervously at the overhead readout. "Sir, we've routed the transmission through 57 independent relays. No bounce, no redirect, no echo." Wren pressed his hand to his mouth, steadying himself. "We're calling into a mirror that no longer shows our reflection." Emrel Voss turned to him, hollow-eyed. "You ever think, maybe they were never bluffing? Maybe the dome wasn't a moment, it was a message." Across Earth's interstellar net, still intact, vibrant, synchronized, Counselor Kether Brax stood in the observation bay of Arc Station 4. He didn't speak until the final Torvan broadcast repeated for the 3rd time. He watched it play without flinching, then turned to Auric Sen. "Send it." Auric didn't nod. He tapped the command string once, no keystrokes needed. A laser plasma filament encoded the reply into raw transmission code. No firewall, no encryption, no courtesy. The reply spanned every Torvan-linked system, routed through their oldest communication protocol, the one they had once required Earth to use. "You executed a healer during surgery. You desecrated neutrality. You questioned our humanity. So we erased your certainty. No music, no insignia, no declaration of conclusion, just finality, clean, surgical, irrefutable. On the Torvon capital node, the message scrawled across every visible surface that still processed foreign input. It reached their food units, their archives, their medical bays, their navigational overlays. It hit harder than fire, because it wasn't a bomb, it was a verdict. Atop the Genthary moon, within the quiet medical dome, where it all began, the AI continued its post-operative subroutine. The room had remained sealed, its purpose no longer political, its function no longer triage. It was memorial now. Across the stasis wall, microscopic laser filaments engraved Core's name into the transparent alloy. Beneath the point of impact, no sound accompanied the carving, just a shimmer of particles lifting from the surface like memory leaving flesh. Dr. Halvan Core, last oath, first do no harm, unless harm demands peace. Below that, a pulsing dot, not linked to any network, not sending, not waiting, just existing. The AI registered its final report. Operation complete. Thread closed. Entity removed. Status, clean. Far above, Earth's satellite mesh continued its steady rhythm, nodes blinking across systems like stars in deliberate choreography. Nothing out of place, everything operational. Back on Torvon Prime, Ren stood before the central Nexus screen. Faces of old allies, static, logos of former treaties, scrambled or unrecognized. Entire knowledge clusters, once foundational to their empire's diplomacy, returned syntax errors, or faded mid-query. His hands trembled. "What did we do?" asked a younger officer behind him. Ren didn't answer right away. He stared out over the skeletal skyline, where no incoming ships approached, no banners welcomed foreign envoys, no council beacons blinked in anticipation of diplomacy. "We thought they were weak," he said, "because they healed. And now?" Ren let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Now they've proven what it means when the hand that heals also remembers." In the lower sectors of the capital, automated systems continued their rotations, blind, recursive, disconnected. An archival drone hovered above a forgotten street plaque. Its scanner failed to read the script. The AI within attempted a query, found nothing. It powered down and fell quietly against the stone, blinking once before its lights faded completely. In orbit, surveillance lenses recorded the final active transmission on Torvon's system. "We are losing reality. Nothing responds. No one hears us. Where are we?" The AI that captured it didn't forward the message. It stored it inside a recursive buffer. No reply followed, because the answer had already been given. Earth hadn't silenced them through aggression. It hadn't shut them down with force. It had simply removed them from recognition. The punishment wasn't death. It was irrelevance. From a distance, Earth's interstellar net glowed like a living spine through blackened space, untouched, deliberate, unmoved. A system that once offered healing had become something else. A mirror with memory, a verdict with no appeal, and across it all, silence, neither peace nor hostility. Just the quiet certainty that some actions rewrite the architecture of trust forever. The engraving cooled beneath sterile glass, untouched by time, untouched by forgiveness. No monument would rise, no anthem would play, but across the systems the silence spoke louder than war drums, an echo that outlasted signal and scream alike. Earth hadn't waged a campaign. It had written a verdict, not in fire, not in blood, but in the quiet dismantling of relevance. And at the center of that verdict, a single name endured, not carved in vengeance, but in justice too complete to require explanation.